The Lombardi Trophy's been handed out. LaRue's suspension's been handed out. And the Oilers have their hand out going into the deadline. All that and more at Sports QuaranTV. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sports QuaranTV. Chris Dobson, Gerry Green. We've got a great show. We are going to start off exactly where we started off last week because it was massive. We've got a winner for the Lombardi Trophy. The Super Bowl has been handed out. Gerry, before we break it down and give us our thoughts, I'm assuming you sat down. Did you sit down and watch the Super Bowl, or were you there exclusively for a Rihanna concert? What'd you do? I want to hear it.
No, the concert didn't do anything for me. I thought, technically with all the levels, as Kramer would say, it was interesting. But other than that, it didn't turn my crank at all. But the end of it was so interesting, Chris. Where you have I know. Well, you have a situation where you could have either Kansas City score a touchdown or kick a field goal to take the lead, but there would still be time on the clock. And to have a play such as the interference call that was made on the defensive back for the Philadelphia Eagles, it was such ticky-tacky. Watch it fast, watch it slow. It was a slight, and then for them to comment it afterwards that they thought, well, a penalty, if it was a penalty, it was a penalty. They're just holding their tongue is all they're doing, because it was ticky-tacky. And what it did was, with a minute, I think, and 50 left at the time, it allows Kansas City to have a first down and take away a fantastic finish, because then the Chiefs just run out the clock, kick the field goal with no time left, or 8 seconds, whatever it was. Really, really sad ending to what was a fantastic game.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think if you look at the way, as far as I'm concerned right now, the Philadelphia Eagles got out-coached. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, that's how that game went. Now, the second half was a complete difference maker compared to the first half. Now, that play doesn't happen without the unselfish play. You talked about that last drive going down in when he runs down the sideline, stops the 1 yard line to keep the clock going. Now, I know that crushed a lot of people's prop bets into the Super Bowl. They had him scoring 1 touchdown anytime. But overall, that's exactly what it did. Now, the question mark coming into it was, you talked about the ticky-tack play and whether or not it should have been called. Now, I'm on the opposite side of what your argument here is on this, and that is, you know what? I saw Coach Tony Dungy talking about it as well, and he says, no, that's the right call. There was a hold there. You got to call it.
It was a hand check. He wouldn't have been able to catch it anyways, Chris, where it was thrown.
That I don't
whether
disagree
or not he
with.
was held for half a second or not. And if he was held for half a second.
The biggest issue, I had 2 bigger issues that game that weren't that specific play, and that was one, this could have been exploded completely the other way on that fumble that was turned over, that fumble that came back. They said he didn't have time. I watched that replay 1,000 times over, and I thought that he caught that ball, made a football play, and there was a fumble on it. And the other one was that reception that, and this is what I love about the NFL and wide receivers. Yeah. You see it when they don't know whether they caught it or whether they got their feet down. They run on in and they give you the hand check signal to get back up on the line and try to snap it right away. Again, I felt like that should have been good. But anyways, you are right. Overall, the game was, look, I was excited. The script didn't play out. Everyone's talking about the script that went floating around the internet. Well, it didn't end that way. It was a 3-point game, though. But I do want to specifically move on to this topic, and that is the second half adjustments. We were talking about where the 2 teams were different. Right. Is this the second half adjustment, in your opinion, was that the difference of this football game?
Absolutely, Chris. Philadelphia did not make any, and why would they? Because the 2 previous games they played in against the Giants and San Francisco, they didn't change anything because they had big leads at the half against inferior teams that didn't have the offense that Kansas City has and don't have Patrick Mahomes. I think they were somewhat arrogant about making any changes because they did have a good first half. But you've got to be prepared for the other team to make the changes. And that's what I always loved about Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick always made it 2 games. The first half was 1 game. The second half was a second game. And that's exactly what Andy Reid did. And Andy Reid was making all the calls. And I saw an interesting piece on the NFL Network, Chris. Remember the 2 touchdowns that Kansas City scored with nobody around those receivers?
Right. Yep.
Andy Reid was playing with the minds of the defensive coordinator for Philadelphia, finding out what they were going to do if they ran a certain play, and then the next play, run that play, and that's how they got so wide open. It was totally out-coached in the second half. That was the biggest difference. And Andy Reid looks like a genius in what he did to make that Philadelphia defense look so silly. And I thought the Philadelphia defense was great, and they looked pretty good in the first half. But I'm telling you, they got undressed in the second.
I fully agree. I think that, look, Sirianni and what he did, again, all props to the Eagles for making it as far as they did. Their defense carried them, but going into this game, you're right. I don't know what conversation took place in that locker room, but that kind of tips into my next topic. And that was one of the biggest, headlines for this side of things, that the Eagles led the league in sacks this season, but didn't get to Patrick Mahomes once this game. Now, again, I'm sure Patty Mahomes talked to his boys. He was playing on a bum ankle to begin with. So he said, guys, at the end of the day, don't let him get to me. I don't care what it costs. I'll buy you all Lambos. I don't care. Just don't let him touch me. But overall, you got to give props to the Kansas City O-line, who shut down, one of the best pass rushers in the league.
Only real football connoisseurs know exactly what the offensive line does. And they're a very important, integral part to any team. Both defensive and offensive lines are important. That's where it all starts. The protection of Mahomes, who they say maybe was rushed 10 times to throw the ball. The great run he had out of the pocket late in the game to get them down close for that winning field goal. And number 3 was the way they don't get talked about enough, and that the defense really is kind of a shiny thing that media like to focus on, because the offensive line can be boring, and they are, and they did, and they made everything happen right. And Mahomes does it too, and the whole team does it. They didn't have a penalty in the second half. Mahomes throws only 1 incompletion. They ran the ball very well in the second half. It was just beautiful to watch. Even though I'm not a great Kansas City fan, I'm a great football fan. To see a coach come up with a plan after a halftime that was very long, we can talk about that, and maybe that helped them, having a 29-minute halftime to really get themselves refocused. Maybe that was helpful for Kansas City.
Yeah, you're not wrong. One thing I liked about Andy Reid going to that halftime said, if anybody watches the Rihanna concert, you're not playing in the second half, so stay in the room and figure this out. But what I do like is, you talked about the media earlier, and another good headline that came out, of course, we got to talk about the field itself, the grass on the field. There was many times where you looked at that and how slippery, and players were quoted in the media saying this was the worst field we've ever played on. And of course, to anybody who knows, every year going into the Super Bowl, a new field gets put together for the big game for protection reasons. They want to make sure everybody's okay. This had to have been the worst grass I've ever seen. It was atrocious. Off that opening kickoff, they're lucky. The Philadelphia kicker's lucky. You see that video where it's his ankle rolled over. He's lucky he didn't get hurt.
Yeah. Chris, there was one place particularly that was a key point when Philadelphia was in deep in their own zone kicking a punt. And you could see the punter, he had a bad punt because he didn't want to put that plant leg down on the logo, afraid that he was going to slip. So he adjusted his punt. They didn't show it very much, but you could tell he punted it oddly. And then, of course, it was a short punt that quickly got jumped on, and he ran down the sidelines. Remember, that was a key play in the game. So the field was, and maybe that's why the Philadelphia defense doesn't get a chance to rush as hard as they want to at Mahomes, because they're afraid they're going to lose their footing. And they showed many times where players losing their footing, not only defensive lines all over the place, celebrating in the end zone, guys losing their footing. Anyways, it was a huge factor in the game, and it certainly has to be reviewed.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think they're going to take that back because, like I said, every player out there who talked or spoke to the media talked about how bad it was. So overall, the league's going to have no choice but to step in and look at it. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about specifically, and that is, of course, Patrick Mahomes winning the MVP, arguably not the best quarterback in the game. Could there have been an argument made for Jalen Hurts to win MVP even though the Eagles lost?
Could they give the MVP to the offensive line? They possibly could have done that. I know, yes, he could. He had a tremendous day, Chris. You're right. It wasn't his fault they lost. He drove them down for the tying touchdown after giving up after that punt return that resulted in a touchdown where Kansas City got right back in, where Kansas City took the lead for the first time. I was impressed the way Hurts drove them down to get them tied again, and then it resulted in that last drive that resulted in that field goal. So yes, absolutely. He ran for 3, I think, Chris, and threw for 1. His numbers were excellent. The only mistake, and it's a big one, Chris.
That fumble.
The fumble was a huge mistake. He wasn't being pressured. He was switching hands, I think, whatever he was doing, knocked it out of his own hand, really. Major mistake. But yes, theoretically, Chris, he could have got MVP, but you got to give it to the guy who's generating the offense for Kansas City, which was the difference in the second half.
Jerry, we're going to move on. We're going to go to the QMJHL. We've only got one thing I want to discuss here, and that is, of course, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League has finally handed out its indefinite suspension of Zachary Leroux. They've come down. They've I guess in their words, put the hammer down on a 10-game suspension, which before I sound off, I know we were talking about this off camera, and I just, are you shocked by a 10-game suspension here?
First, Chris, I think for those that don't know, Zachary Leroux was coming off the ice in Gatineau the other night after a hard-fought game against the Olympic, and there were fans at the door leaving the ice to go to the dressing room that would maybe have said something or were gesturing something, whatever the case may be. I thought the security was a little lax in around that area. There's not many places in the queue that you could be standing right by that gate, especially for a visiting team. And Leroux had a reaction to somebody, and his stick was involved, and that's what the queue was judging on. And so it's not like Zachary Leroux has ever not been in trouble. I went back, Chris, in 2021, he got suspended 4 times for a total of 13 games. In 21-22, he was suspended 3 times for a total of 11 games. And already this year, he was suspended once, 3 games for a stage fight. What does that mean, Chris? 7 times, 27 games in the last 3 seasons for Zachary Leroux is certainly a repeat offender, and certainly seems to have some sort of a switch that goes off when something personal happens towards him. It seems that way.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is this, and that is, I don't care who you are. I don't care what team you're playing for. I saw the interview with the young lad who got speared through the glass.
Oh, yes.
And yes. There was an interview with him, and he said all he screamed at Zachary Leroux was, "The Mooseheads suck." That's what he said. Zachary Leroux. Now, there's 3 sides to every story, and you know that. Whether that's what happened or not, who knows? But what I will say is this. As a member of, don't forget, he's a first-round draft pick of the Nashville Predators, too, I might add. So you've got to think that they're looking at this right now. If I'm the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and when the conversation started to flow, the league stepped in right away and said, until we see anything, we're not doing anything. We're not even going to investigate until somebody's got proof. And then amazingly how within 24 hours, everyone's got a camera on their phone now. A video surfaces of Zachary Leroux spearing this kid in the stands. The league suspends him indefinitely. And then all of a sudden, a couple days later goes, you know what? 10 games because he's a repeat offender. Are you kidding me? 10 games. 10 games for a guy who's been suspended 8 times, for a guy who should know better. Don't forget his previous suspension. He's already missed half the season with an injury. So this suspensions come in the last month. So as far as I'm concerned, this pigeon needs to absolutely be treated. They should have thrown the book at him. This was an opportunity for the QMJHL to step in, to do something about this. And I can't stand it. As far as I'm concerned, the Moncton Wildcats did themselves a justice by including him in that trade that sent him to Halifax. I know a lot of people were upset about it. It's like somebody knew. The guy looks crazy on the ice. He's got all the skill in the world with a 10-cent brain. And as far as I'm concerned, I could care less if that guy could ever play a game in the QMJHL again. He's only going to get 10 games. He's lucky, because if I was running the league, he'd be out. He'd be done. And I don't care. It irritates me so bad that you think that you're above the league here.
He always has, and what has resulted from it is he's been a huge distraction for the team. The very next night, or 2 nights later, they're on a Quebec road trip. They go to Gatineau, then they're in Drummondville. Drummondville's 30 points lesser than Halifax, and Drummondville beats Halifax. Don't tell me that the Leroux distraction didn't have a factor in that game. They do win the next one against Shawinigan. And then here's the interesting situation. They've got Bathurst this week, and they got Moncton twice. Let's see what they've got, because they've got to regroup without him. And then, Chris, they go to Victo, Sherbrooke, and Quebec the following week. So if he's a distraction, he's certainly an asset when he's on the ice. We'll see how the Halifax Mooseheads adjust. And the major thing is here, Chris, it's very selfish. It's very selfish to not have rabbit ears and just walk down the aisle into your dressing room and don't put the team in jeopardy by your actions. And that's what's happened here. And he's a huge distraction to them right now.
All that proved to me is he's a Zachary LaRue guy first, Halifax Mooseheads guy second. All right, let's move on before I even get more worked up. No wonder Hockey Canada didn't put him on that roster.
I don't want to see you go crazy there.
All right, let's talk about the National Hockey League because some big things have happened there, of course, and that is Vladimir Tarasenko, now a member of the New York Rangers. Didn't take him long to score in his first game either. I love the trade. The only thing that slowed that down is now whether or not Patrick Kane doesn't look like he's heading to New York anymore. But overall, Tarasenko in New York makes perfect sense.
Chris, I want Tarasenko over Kane. I know the New York Rangers were in the running for Kane. Kane is suspected bad hip, let's say. But Tarasenko, he's another sniper. I don't know if they needed it. I think Kane's more of a playmaker. But here it is, since he's arrived, and not since he's arrived, but the Rangers are on a 5-game winning streak. Now, here's the test, Chris. They come out west. They're going to play in Vancouver. Then they've got Edmonton Friday and Calgary Saturday. It'll be a real good test. We'll get a good chance to see them on Hockey Night in Canada and see what kind of impact Tarasenko has had. But a huge move for a Rangers team that is essentially the same team that went to the conference finals against Tampa last year and we're just a step away from the Stanley Cup. They've got all the same ingredients, and they've added Tarasenko to it, a very dangerous team.
Oh, I fully agree. And I think if you look at what the Rangers are trying to acquire, the first line you made before you started talking was, I'd rather have Tarasenko over Patrick Kane. You're absolutely right, because he's the guy that's going to fit in well. You got Panarin in there. You got everybody who in there who fits that mold really well. The New York Rangers are a dangerous team to compete with right now. And, I'm excited to see how this thing plays out. But speaking of trades, or the trade that seems to be rumored, of course, nobody knows for sure because he's been talked about all year long, and that is Erik Karlsson. It looks as though, and I exclusively say looks as though, because I'm going to use the word big rumored, but it looks like the Oilers are trying to figure out a way to bring Erik Karlsson into the fold here to play with Connor McDavid. And only one of two things: Erik Karlsson's going to win the Norris Trophy this year. He might even win the Hart Trophy this year. It would, if I'm Edmonton, you do whatever you can, because that's what they're lacking, an offensive defenseman. That's what they need there. He would be a perfect fit there, but they don't have the cap space to afford him. So a third team.
Well, that's the thing, Chris. I like Edmonton. No, I find Edmonton similar case as Toronto, but I like Edmonton. Not crazy about Toronto. In regards to, they'll need some help from whatever partner they get with to make a Karlsson trade happen, or a Timo Meier trade happen for Toronto, or whatever the case may be. Those two teams are up against it so closely. They need some help and some cooperation from the team that they're going to get the so-called finishing touch. And it would be a finishing touch for Edmonton. Edmonton needs a Norris type of leader on the blue line. They've never had it since Paul Coffey or Kevin Lowe or whatever the case. They need a highlight piece on that blue line. Karlsson would be a great fit, Chris. I just don't know if either Toronto or Edmonton can make it happen for either one of them.
All right, we've got about a minute and a half before we're heading to the wrap here, Jerry. But I want to talk to you about your Jets for a second, because should the Jets look at being a big buyer, and what type of player are they looking for? Everyone's talking wingers. What do you think?
Here they've got a Vezina goaltender in Hellebuck. They've got a Norris Trophy candidate in Josh Morrissey. They have a capable other defensive core, very capable and underrated, a no-name defense, if you will. And they've got a great top six and a solid bottom six who do their role. They play their roles, let's say. What they would need, Timo Meier would be such an amazing fit, right? Because, and I've mentioned it before, he and Nikolai Ehlers were teammates in Halifax. But even if they got a Bertuzzi from Detroit, or somebody subtle, they've done it before by getting Paul Stastny one year and how quickly he fitted in. So I think they're one player away, Chris. You might think I'm crazy. I think the West is wide open. They're one player away from taking a real run at the West.
So I don't think you're crazy, actually. Look, if it wasn't for the Habs, I like the Jets. As long as the Habs aren't playing the Jets, they're fine. But the connection you made between Timo Meier and Nick Ehlers, I absolutely love it, because you're right. I think Timo Meier is a perfect fit for what's going on in Winnipeg right now. I think he very well could be. Now, again, they're going to have to get creative to make that work. But I do think it's an absolute possibility. What are they willing to give up for a guy like him? But overall, all I know is that if the Jets can land a guy like Meyer, watch out. Anybody in the West, the Jets are for real. Well, Gerry, it's time to close this thing off. It is time for the wrap. We're going to start where you always start because there's only a month left of the Maritime Hockey League regular season. What's the final update? What's the push looking like?
Yeah, and technically, Chris, that means about 10 to 12 games for most of the teams in the MHL. And things are tight at the top of the North Division, Chris. 3 teams vying for the top spot. Edmonton Blizzard at 55 points, Campbellton Tigers at 54, and the Summerside Western Capitals at 53. But breathing down their neck, coming up from 4th, the Miramichi Timberwolves with 49 points. It looks like the Timberwolves have wrapped up the final playoff spot, the 4th playoff spot in the Northern Division with a victory the other night against Grand Falls. Yarmouth still sits at number 1 in the South Division, and that is undisputed. They've clinched that. There is a battle for 4th in the division with Pictou and Amherst fighting it out. The game of the week, Chris, this week, it's an interesting one. It has Summerside playing in Edmonton. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is they're going to play 4 periods. Why? Well, on January 28th, in a game between Edmonton and Summerside, the goaltender for Edmonton beat up the crease so bad at the end of the second period when the Summerside Capitals goalie went out to get in for the 3rd period. It was all beat up. Referees called the game. So they're going to make up a period, and then they're going to play 3 more. It'll be very interesting to see the result, Chris. That's what's happening in the MHL. What's happening with the Canadian women's soccer team, Chris? They're in the news this week.
Team Canada's captain Christine Sinclair says the ongoing labor dispute with Canada Soccer has left her and other team representatives exhausted and deflated. They're preparing to face off against the top-ranked Americans in the opening game of the She Believes Cup. And it's honestly shocking. You know, you kind of got a feel for these athletes right now. You know, the 6th-ranked Canadian women upset that their grievances have not been addressed by the governing body, and they said they would not take part in the 4-team tournament. You know, they're coming off an Olympic win. They're going into a World Cup here coming up. You know, they're just looking for equality at this point. You know, we're going to have more of this story as the next couple weeks progress. But at the same time, it's sad to see this whole thing going down, especially with the push that Canadian soccer has made over the last, couple of years on the both men's and the women's side. Right now, the women's represent the Canadian soccer market on a phenomenal stage. They're probably one of the best. Not probably. They are one of the best in the world. They deserve their equal shot. I'm rooting for them at this point. But yeah, we're gonna keep an eye on this one because I think this isn't the last we've heard of this. Mm-hmm. Speaking of, we're gonna go back to hockey for you, and we're gonna stay with the AUS because the playoffs are starting soon. How's that going to turn out?
Yeah, I love the ice, be it curling or hockey, but hockey again with the AUS. Their regular season is over. Playoffs are just getting underway in the men's side with Moncton playing UPEI in the first round. See, Moncton and St. Mary's, UMB and St. Mary's finished on top of the standings. Again, the Reds at 24-4-2 finished number 1. So they get buys. So what happens is Moncton plays PEI in a best of 3, and then you have Acadia and St. FX playing in a best of 3. Game to watch this week. Moncton hosts PEI for game 2 on Friday night at 7 o'clock at the J. Louis Levesque. On the women's side, UNB finishes on top again. 23-2-3 was their record. St. FX finished number 2. They get buys. Moncton again is in the next round. They're taking on St. Mary's. St. Mary's won game 1 3-1. They're playing game 2 tonight in Moncton. Game 3 if necessary. And Dalhousie are in the other early round game for the AUS women. Aaron Rodgers is confusing me, Chris. Why is he going on like this?
Well, you figured it was just about that time. Year after year, we're having the same conversation. The Super Bowl just ended, and all people are talking about is Aaron Rodgers and his darkness retreat. He's going on a 4-day darkness retreat to find himself, to decide what he wants to do. There's a lot of speculation coming. I mean, there's heavily rumored out there now that he's going to go to the Jets. I saw that Joe Namath reached out and said, if you come to the Jets, I'll let you unretire the number 12. Then you got Devontae Adams, who's tweeting out, can't wait to see you in Vegas. But overall, Aaron Rodgers is shutting out the world. He's going away for 4 straight days to live in complete darkness, to collect his thoughts and figure it out. I saw a great piece with him on the Pat McAfee show this week where he was talking about how, all the rumors coming on, and he says, look, hey, I'm the only guy who knows what's happening right now. So if anybody tells you anything differently, they haven't heard it from me. I haven't made my decision. The question mark still remains at this point if he's going to continue to play. He's still a Packer at this point, and until that changes, we'll see what happens. So Green Bay is going to have to make a decision first and I'm sure they'll do it collectively with Aaron Rodgers. But is it time for Jordan Love to take over this team? Who knows? But again, 4 days plus once he starts talking to the media, maybe by next week's show, we'll know whether or not Aaron Rodgers got lost in the dark.
Yeah.
So we'll stick around to find out. Jerry, one of your favorite tournaments of the year is coming up, the Scotties, buddy. You must be fired up. We've been waiting to talk about this since last year.
Yeah, the Scotty Tournament of Hearts starts this week, Friday, Saturday, I believe, in Kamloops, BC. All the big names are going to be there. You're going to have the defending champion, Carrie Arneson's going to be there. Jennifer Jones is there. Holman's there. They're all there. And we have representing New Brunswick, and she's been very consistent, I think, to the semifinals last year. Talking about Andrea Kelly, who will be representing New Brunswick from the Capital Winter Club in Fredericton. We wish them all the best as they head out. There's 3 wildcard teams. There's 2 divisions. I love the new structure. The only thing I don't like, Chris, it's in Kamloops, which is a 4-hour difference. The draws are at 12:30, 5:30, and 10:30 Atlantic, and the final would be a 10:30 Atlantic start Sunday from now. So that's the only disappointing part about it. Otherwise, I'm excited about the Scotty Tournament of Hearts. What about Tiger Woods? Is he excited, Chris?
Tiger Woods, not only is he excited, but he feels good enough to play at the Riviera. I mean, with the Genesis Invitational coming up this week, there's a lot of things that stick out for me right now when it comes to Tiger Woods, and that is, he was able to practice this week, walk 16 holes, and then he walked back, did it without a cart. He says his knee feels great. The ankle's a bit concerned at this point, so he's not quite sure how that's going to go. But overall, one quote that automatically sticks out to me from Tiger Woods regarding this tournament was, I believe I wouldn't have put myself out here if I didn't think I could win. Obviously with the Masters coming up in 2 months from now, this is, the start to him. This is a big tournament for Tiger, Jerry. If you go back, and realize this is the first time, this is his first tournament with a cut, and he's doing it without a cart since the British Open last July.
No cut, no cart.
No cut, no cart. But yeah, either way, I'm really excited. I mean, although if you're a betting man and you're looking to, maybe make a couple extra dollars on the side, it's a long shot in the dark to even make the cut, let alone win. But hey, throw some money on Tiger Woods. You never know. There's going to be a lot of great talent in this tournament, though. Although, if you look at the PGA versus Live, which is, started heating up real bad, this is just going to keep going and building and building and building. And you know what? I'm here for it. Either way, Tiger Woods. Golf's better when Tiger Woods is on the golf course. I'm sorry. Absolutely. I said what I said. That's going to wrap it up for us, Jerry. We hope everyone's had a great show. We've loved seeing your guys' faces. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.